Hello! Today I'd like to get back to such a property of items woven from paper with as flexibility. We've already got a few masterclasses on this topic. We showed them quite a while ago. Recently I've got an order to weave a vase, and it has inspired me for some creativity, so I'm getting back to this quality again. So today I'm going to talk about flexibility and show you the way I've woven such vases. I've used such a box available at hand as a form, and I was aimed at making a vase big enough for a 3-liter jar to fit in. As a result, I've got such big vases, but I've decided to use a smaller one for the masterclass. We are going to make it shaped like this. For this vase I've used a bit different box, this one. I found it at home too. I didn't create any special form on my own, just used what I already had. Let me share the rest of the tricks. I've cut off the top of a plastic bottle and put it inside. This way I can use it not only for dry bouquets, but for fresh flowers as well. At first we have to weave a regular square bottom. I've outlined the form, cut such a workpiece from cardboard, so now let's weave a normal bottom. For big items I use double tubes. In this case I'm using single ones. I've got such a piece of foamed plastic. So I pin dry paper tubes to the base. I've left a few tubes dry for convenience. It is easier to use dry tubes as a base. Now I start weaving a bottom with wet tubes in a normal printed cotton weave technique. Wet tubes settle well. Please note that in this case I lengthen tubes in an unusual way. By laying a new tube over an old one. It is my conscious choice. I don't apply this method often, but in this particular case, when the bottom will be entirely unseen, I see no point in wasting time on traditional lengthening. In this case, I just lay one tube over another. In a moment I'll show you the way I do in detail. So let's do it. Here it will be perfectly seen. I lay the tube end onto the pole, spread some glue on the new tube. For this item I use universal polymeric adhesive, not PVA with cool glue. Why? Because the item will be subject to deformation. So I use universal polymeric adhesive to be sure the item won't fall apart. Let's repeat the process of lengthening once again in the same very way. I choose the point where I can lay the tube end onto the pole. Then I spread glue on the new tube and place it under the previous pole. I'm sure all of you already know this method, but most weavers don't use it. I don't use it often either, because the point of lengthening is thicker than the rest of the cloth. It is especially well seen at the sides of a vertical item like a box or a vase. In such a case, it is difficult to hide the joint. But in my case, I believe this method is quite feasible. My tubes are quite thin. 3 rows fit in here to make the intervals between these poles and the lateral ones equal. Here I've got 3 rows as well. So now I leave the remaining tube and start weaving with a new tube. Leaving a tail for raising. Well, actually I continue weaving in the same way. Make sure your tubes don't slide together. Try to keep them directed along the lines of the workpiece. Continue this way until you finish the bottom. So I've woven as much as I needed to get a pole in the corner. I've got sections of 3, 3 and 3 rows ending in the corner, 3 rows sections from both sides. If you've noticed, I didn't start weaving from the very beginning of the form, but left some space to finish weaving from this side. I'll try to get the same number of rows here and to finish with a horizontal pole in the very corner. Sometimes I have to tighten the weaving. Anyway, I do my best to ensure the poles are situated at the very edges. In this case, the intervals between the poles are equal. When lengthening, press the joint more carefully. When weaving a big vase, I had double poles both here and at the sides. This way and here. Well, it's not very convenient to lengthen at the edge, but it is possible. The tubes are flexible and easy to work with. It looks like I won't have to tighten the weaving. I'm finishing it right to have the extreme pole in the very corner. 1, 2, and the pole comes out right where I need it. Now I entwine with one row of a 2-tube rope and leave a tail of one of the working tubes to use as a pole. As a result, I'll get a double pole in the corner. Weave a 2-tube rope in the corner. I hug both tubes, which will be used as a pole. In this corner I've got one tube so far, but I'll add one more. Here I've got 2, and here 2 as well. So after I raise the poles and start weaving the sides, I'll have to add only one pole in this corner. Reach the end of the row and finish the row, leading the lower and the upper tail here. That's all. I turn the piece of weaving over, try the foam on. My foam is lightweight, so before I pass on to weaving freely around the foam, I've decided to fasten it. I've got such strips of painter's tape. I can even use them a couple of times. Well, at least for me it's easier this way. It's up to you to choose your preferred way of working. I fasten all the 4 corners. Well, I don't fasten the poles too strong because I'm going to take the pieces of tape off while weaving. But so far, in order to achieve a smooth, nice looking shape, here I'm going to add one more pole in the second or third row. Let's fasten this one as well. I've got the strips prepared beforehand. Sometimes I use them for the second time. This way. After this, I'm going to weave 4 or 5 rows in the technique of a 3-tube rope. Well, because my tubes are rather thin, I believe I can even weave 5 or 6 rows this way. So I'm weaving this way. When I reach the corner, I raise the pole neatly. Then I fasten it again until I raise the weaving. It helps. And continue weaving a 3-tube rope. Now I'll have to lengthen the tube. Here I plan to stop weaving a 3-tube rope and pass on to open work pattern. So I'm finishing the row. I've got a rope consisting of 3 tubes. I'm laying the first one over 2 poles. Then the second one. I finish the row in the reverse order, like I did when finishing every row. After this I'm going to weave a 2-tube rope. But before I pass on to a 2-tube rope, I'm going to lengthen the poles. Here I've got dry poles prepared. Sometimes, if I doubt that the poles will insert into each other well, I can use toothpicks. In this case I see that I can do without them. My tubes are rigid and they are even a bit thicker than the working tubes, so there will be no problem here. The tubes are dry and easy to lengthen, so in this case I won't use any toothpicks. In other cases, I split a toothpick into two, spread some glue in it, and insert it here in the old tube. I leave a toothpick tail sticking out and pin a new tube onto it. So this way I'm lengthening all the poles in order to weave a lace pattern. So I've lengthened the poles. Now I'm going to hide one of the three tubes. I usually hide it this way, under the row. I'll cut it off later. So far it will serve as a mark of the beginning of the row. So I continue weaving an open work pattern with a 2-tube rope. In order to shape lace or open work, I use such strips. I made them from outdated calendars. These are 2 cm wide, about 3/4 of an inch. I use them when weaving big vases. When it was time to weave a small vase, I cut them into halves without even drawing any lines. So I use such short strips to shape a pattern. I reuse them a few times. Usually I prefer starting from a corner to make it less visible. But this time I continue weaving spirally without finishing the rows. And I start raising the row from the corner, which makes the transition less visible. This way. 1. Now I weave alone. Well, here it's time to lengthen. If it's easier for you, you can lay the item down and weave this way. Be very careful. The tubes are thin and I've just performed lengthening. So in my case it is better to lay the item down. Shape the lace further with the help of a strip. And continue weaving spirally until the required height. The height depends on the height of a vessel you're going to put into the vase. Vessels can be different, so is the height. Continue weaving a 2-tube rope until the required height. I've woven until the required height. This time I plan to put a 1-liter jar inside. This height is sufficient. Now, for the sake of symmetry, I'm going to finish the item with 4 or 5 rows over a 3-tube rope. I reach the starting point of the weaving. Here I've started. Cut the excessive tail, make a smooth transition and weave a 3-tube rope. I add the 3rd tube and start weaving a 3-tube rope. I shape the corners intentionally. This way, lengthen and continue weaving a few more rows. When weaving the last row, I take additional pulls off the corners, preparing for edge trimming. The last lengthening. Perform it this way. And finish the weaving. The first, second and third working tubes, and tuck them in under the row. All the 3 in the same way. And finish the weaving. My poles are rigid. Usually I moisten the tube with hot running water, leave them in a plastic bag overnight and perform edge trimming, bending in the morning. This time I'm going to apply a fast moistening method. Inject some hot water into the tubes, which will make them wet and allow me to bend the edge fast. I've got some hot water in the cup I'm injecting a bit of hot boiling water into each tube. I've already tried this method. I apply it when I'm pressed for time and cannot spare a night for tube moistening. I'm performing birch rod-like bending. I've joined additional poles. As a rule, I cut off the tails right away, but this time I'm not going to, because the item will be exposed to deformation, so I'd better cut them later. Perform the bending until the end of the row. So I reach the beginning of the row, take an extra pole off. I have to lead the tube here. One. Let's lead the next tube here as the mark shows. This way, and lead the last one here. The tubes are already wet and soft. That's all. I don't cut off the tails on purpose. You'll see the reason later. My next step is taking these strips used to help shaping the lace away. After this, I'm going to prime the item and pass on to the very zest of today's video, flexibility of our items. So far I'm taking the strips out neatly. Here I've got some water splashed while moistening the tubes, but that's no problem. I can reuse these strips even if they are broken into parts. Or I can make new ones. You can hog them with a stick neatly or cut them into parts if they are too long and throw them away. The next stage is priming. I use such a deep penetration prime coat. I bought it recently and I like working with it. It is a concentrated product. It should be diluted 1:4. As a rule I do, but in this case I need my item to be very firm, that's why I'm coating it with pure concentrate. At first inside and then outside. I coat it very carefully. The poles can slide from side to side a little. I'll show you an example of a big vase where I reached the effect of waving on purpose. Don't forget that you need a firm bottom. Now the most interesting thing. I just twist it this way. Now when the item is coated with primer all over, it has become flexible. Just don't forget to try the foam in, to make sure you don't twist it too much so that the foam can no longer fit in. I try my best to shape a square top. Well, this one behaves alright. It doesn't twist and doesn't untwist much. It does twist and doesn't untwist much, though as you can see the material does offer some resistance. I mean, the item is trying to untwist to its original shape, but while I'm trying to keep it from untwisting. So I twist it and hold with this way for a while. I come to the item and twist it a few times before it gets completely dry. That's why I didn't get rid of these poles and applied polymetric adhesive while lengthening, to keep the item from sliding apart due to deformation. This is the reason. Now I have to let the vase dry in this state. In order to make the process faster and to avoid spending too much time around it, you can put either a heavy book or some other weight on top of it. Well, a can of primer will probably be too heavy. Or just leave it this way. It's up to you how to deal with the task. And one more point I've mentioned. When weaving a big vase, I made double poles. In this vase, I have left them the way they are without experimenting. Double poles and double rows seem quite harmonious. As for this vase, I felt like playing a bit with the poles. When primed, they were rather movable, so I've decided to move them around a bit. As an option, you can create a wavy effect like this by collecting the tubes in one point and distributing them in another one. Well, there are different options to play with. Take a look at this vase, please. Well, I'm not sure if the camera can reproduce this effect well enough. After priming, I've coated it with only one layer of lacquer. That's all. It has become firm as wood. I cannot bend or twist it anymore. It has taken the shape I've put it into. So we've got another evidence that an interesting flexible material we work with. If you like the idea, please make a comment. If you think of your own interesting shape, please share it. Good luck to you. If you are not our subscriber yet and have come across this masterclass accidentally, you are welcome to subscribe to our channel. Click like, as this helps to promote the channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon to be notified of our new masterclasses. See you!